I'm back. Hey, part 2 of the Between the Slicks number 15 Monday Morning Racer here, and we've got Jack Beckman. And without any further ado, look, let me give you the intro video, and we'll bring Jack on in.
Fast Jack Beckman, Air Force veteran, cancer survivor, pilot of the Don Schumacher funny car, and owner of one cool car himself. Now on MMR's Between the Slicks Live.
Jack, man, how you doing tonight?
Everything's backwards to me right now. I got to get used to this whole TV thing, Lee.
Right. I know it's challenging. I have to move my chair constantly back and forth, and I finally find that center. And you got to be in the middle. You can't be off in the distance. It's got to be the middle.
Well, just move the wrong way, then go the other way. So we're getting ready to go live, so we talked for a minute before that, and then I see this 45 come up on the screen. And it literally is a 45-second countdown. Like I had to kind of pinch my cheek to keep from falling asleep during that deal.
Well, the good thing is it wasn't there the whole time. It's there for the whole time for you and me, but not during the whole live session. But hey, Sam, look, thanks, man, for checking in on part 2 with Jack. Jack, look. I know you've done the media tour with the U.S. Nationals. Congratulations. You've been asked how were the rounds, and we'll talk about that a little later. I've got some footage, but want to dive into a few questions with you that may be on a different track because I don't hardly get to talk to you. You're so good with fan interaction. You're actually one of the more challenging guys to get an interview with, and the last time I talked to you was Atlanta. So, and I had to wait after 2 drunks that probably don't even remember the conversation. You give that much time. You're that good with fans. Where did you develop that? And why are you so good with fans? Other drivers, they're gone and you're still there. You're signing pistons. You're interacting with fans. You're making the day. Like I remember one little boy, you gave the whole trailer tour of both rigs. So yeah, why are you that way, man?
It's a tough question to answer. I think I'm just wired that way, but I think I'm good with fans because I'm a fan. It's not an act. I think it's really easy to tell the people that feel grateful to have a job like I have, and it's long after the television cameras have gone home for the night. It's long after a lot of the fans have left, and you look in the pits, and it's the drivers that are still hanging out there. And it's not the sad. There's some races where I'll have a relative show up or if my dad's there, we'll go have dinner with them. But I kind of like to stick around till the crew's ready to load the car to let them see how much I appreciate what they do. And, man, I remember when I was a fan, even when I was racing my sportsman car, I loved going up to the pro pits later at night when just about everybody except for the crews had gone home. And once in a while, you'd run into a driver that was still there. And I enjoyed that. I just enjoy my time at the races, and I'm incredibly lucky that I get a paycheck to do something that I love.
Well, man, thank you for you taking the time that you do. If 2020 hadn't gone the way it was, I was thinking about creating a Monday Morning Racer, the greatest fan interaction award, and it'd be this little hinky-dinky trophy. But it'd be out there, and honestly, you'd be top on the list. And I'm sure fans would vote that you would have got something like that because you lead the way, definitely. What would you pass on to like a Justin Ashley right now, to Blake Alexander, those younger guys? Hey, spend time with fans. What would that conversation be like with them being a pro NHRA racer?
I think you have to be genuine, and unless you're an a-hole, then you better pretend that you're not. But I think that the fans, for the most part, are pretty good about picking up on people's true personalities. I'm not saying that there are days that when the TV camera comes along, I've got to, kind of try to snap into that mode to deliver something to cameras, but I'm pretty good at just being me. Or maybe the other way to put it is I'm not smart enough to have an agenda, and there's people out there that are. They're smart enough to have an agenda and turn that switch off and on in the moment. I'm a big Tim Wilkerson fan because the Tim Wilkerson that you see on camera is the Tim Wilkerson that you're having a drink with long after everybody else has gone home. He's a what you see is what you get type of guy. And there's a lot of those out there in drag racing. So I think you just just be you, and the fans that like you for that will be liking you for the right reasons. And if you can't interact with the fans on a consistent basis, you are probably in the wrong sport.
Definitely when it comes to NHRA drag racing, I mean, every ticket is a pit pass. It's just part of it. You don't have quite the barrier like you do in NASCAR or some other forms of motorsports. You have direct access to the drivers, to the crews, and that's what's great about the sport. Yeah, I'd agree. You're probably in the wrong motorsport. Go NASCAR or something. Chris.
But think about that for a moment, Lee. And I love NASCAR. I love all motorsports. NASCAR, they're there for qualifying. They're there for race day. And for the most part, they're sequestered away from the fans. For the most part, with the exception of a couple VIP deals, they are in a completely separate area than the average fan. They hop in the car and they stay in it for 3.5 hours or whatever the duration of the race is. And when they get out, I would imagine they're pretty spent and out of energy, and they go back to their motorhomes or they leave the facility, and that's that. For drag racing, we go out there, we're strapped in the car maybe 15 minutes to the staging lanes. The car's running for about 2 minutes, and then we come back, and if hopefully you've won first round, you have a chance to decompress, go interact with the fans, and then do it all over again. And you try to do that 4 times on race day. Now, I can't ever imagine. Think about Peyton Manning. He's out there leading his team downfield and they score a touchdown. Then he comes off the field while the defense is out there. You're not going to see him grab a Sharpie and go start signing autographs. And drag racing is very much like that. We go perform our job, and then we go out there and we interact with the fans. And we go back and forth, hopefully for a good long race day. And I love that aspect of our sport.
Right. I've thought about it. Like, why does drag racing have such a great formula for fan access? And really in motorsports, the only one that comes close are like sports cars and the superbike guys. And they're at road courses. And road courses, you have a lot of liberty. And the oval tracks with like NASCAR or dirt track racing, a lot of times you don't have pit access. And it's really just the nature of how the racing is designed, the track's laid out. You can't cross it. But you can go all around a drag strip, go back into pits and something else is going, the classes that are racing. So, yeah, it's interesting how the motorsports over time have developed and have their own spin on things and fan interaction and how it's done. And I even think, again, how even the tracks laid out have affected that.
I think that if you sequestered drag race drivers from the fans, we'd be worth more money. You can think of it like a limited edition piece of art. The less people that are able to see it and enjoy it, the value of it goes up. I wouldn't trade my job if you added another zero to my salary. I think, if people think us drag racers make, well, I'm sure there are some drag racers that make $250,000 a year, but I would say on par, a NASCAR driver is going to make roughly 10 times what we do. I still mow my lawn. I do my car oil changes. I do all the housework around the house. Partly because I enjoy it and partly because I really don't want to spend the money to have somebody else do it. My point being, I think it keeps me very grounded and very down to earth. In fact, if I don't find sponsorship for next year, I'm going to go back and work a regular job. I still need a paycheck. I can't afford to take a year off without a paycheck for my family. And it's not like we live in $1 million house.
Right. The drag, it's been interesting the year and a half and being closer to drag racing and seeing, behind the curtain, as it were. It is fascinating, the drivers that are out there, that they really don't make anything on a weekend. They happen to have brought a sponsor and they're in that fuel car for the enjoyment of it, for the fun of it, but they really leave and hopefully they broke even. And that may just be it. I mean, there's some cats out there, they're not really making anything.
That's exactly right. And I'd say that applies to a pretty large percentage of fuel racers, and more so in the sportsman ranks. Now, they cost significantly less to run those cars, but it's harder to find sponsorship for those cars. But you take a guy like Terry Haddock who comes out there, and you almost have to qualify to get that first round money and hope you don't break anything just to break even for the weekend. And for the cars like I drive for Don Schumacher, our funny cars have won every race this year. And all those first place, even if it was a standard year without COVID, without the reduced purses because of the reduced attendance, the winnings don't pay for the car. You have to have funding to supplement the winnings. I don't want to say the winnings are icing on the cake, because for a team like Terry McMillan or Tim Wilkerson, that they have good sponsorship, but they still rely on the money the car makes to fulfill. I'm assuming this anyway. I hope nobody's getting upset at me about this, but I'm assuming that they still need that money to procure the rest of the parts they need to finish a standard year.
Right. This year it definitely makes it a challenge for Terry Haddock with the strutmasters.com funny car. And I'm helping Leverage Racing in trying to procure some sponsorship and things of that nature. And yeah, it's definitely challenging for them. I mean, you talk to like the Leverage gang and they're like, we have to at least qualify 18th. We can't be 19th with, 20 cars show up.
The reason you're saying that is in a standard year, a team that loses first round but had qualified gets 10,000. 17th and 18th, which would be your first two non-qualifiers, would get 7,500, and 19th and 20th would get 6,500. So at least there's some money there for the NIPER teams that show up. Well, because of COVID, because of the restricted fan attendance, because of the lack of money coming in the gates at these races, there isn't the money to pay the 17th and 18th, much less the 19th and 20th qualifiers. And in fact, the purse is going to be reduced for everybody for the remainder of the year. So it becomes that much more critical that A, you're not hurting parts, and B, you're running within your means there. Now, we're not running Fridays for the remainder of the season, so that's cut out 2 qualifying runs, and it's cut out the money that it costs to run the cars down the track. But what hasn't changed is you still got all your travel expenses. Even though you've cut down hotel rooms by one night, the team still has to get to and from the racetrack. You haven't necessarily reduced the salaries. There's a lot of fixed costs there. The heating and air conditioning at the shop still costs the same as it ever did.
It sure does. It sure does. So it's definitely a challenging year for all of motorsports, but I definitely think it hits the fuel ranks harder than I think most people realize because of the nature of how fuel is really made up. I mean, for example, Cameron Ferret, he wasn't in the car all year because he didn't have a sponsor to get into the Terry Haddock ride. Now he's got a sponsor for this weekend at the Gator Nationals. He's going to be in that ride. I mean, you have to bring people to play along with you in this situation. It's fascinating, definitely eye-opening when you compare it to other motorsports and what's happening and the extreme nature of what y'all are doing. I mean, it's 300 plus miles per hour, in under, sub 4 seconds runs. It's like, it should be the other way around, you would think, but we are what we're in.
Sometimes I get a time slip at the top end, say car ran 3.98 seconds, 312 miles an hour. And you're looking like, wow, it had a cylinder out of really, really crappy top end speed. That's 312 miles an hour. And you're like, wow, what was wrong with your car?
Right. And it's come along so quickly. I was watching the 86 Keystone Nationals, I believe it was yesterday, and Dick LaHaye beats Don Garlitz, and it was like a 5:56, and it's like, wow. I mean, we've gone so far.
Right, and even though that's quarter mile, keep in mind that even back then, it took the cars 0.8 of a second to run the last 320 feet. So, a 550 would be 4.70 to 1,000 foot, and now top fuels cars are going 3.62, and a funny car's gone 3.79. I hold the all-time funny car quarter mile record at 333 miles an hour. Robert Height's gone 339 to 1,000 foot. These crew chiefs just never stop figuring out ways to make these cars quicker. And the crazy thing about this is, as we keep getting quicker and quicker, really the box around what we're allowed to do with the cars has tightened significantly. And I understand why. NHRA has done that to save us from ourselves. If the sky was the limit, fewer and fewer cars would be able to come out and compete. For instance, Don Schumacher Machine Shop makes a lot of parts, so we had better parts and no wait in line. And it was really quickly after we got this advantage that Don decided to start marketing those parts to other fuel teams, both to reduce the cost and to give everybody access to the parts. And our crew chiefs all bitched about it. They're like, whoa, we did all this R&D and you're going to sell our stuff. And Don said, if somebody beats us with our parts, that means their people are doing a better job than ours. But my point is NHRA doesn't let us do a lot of things with the cylinder heads, with the superchargers anymore. And in fact, they put rev limiters on the car, gear restrictions on the car. They add weight to the car, and we still find ways to go faster and faster. It's stunning to me just in the 14 years that I've been driving this car, we've picked up 16 to 20 miles an hour from the starting line to 660 feet. And the cars are roughly 100 pounds heavier now than they were back then.
Yeah, it's crazy impressive. I was there at Maple Grove when Ron fired off that, I think it was 339 miles per hour. And it's just like, whoa, what are, and it turns heads. And interestingly enough, it turns heads of, guess who? The officials. And there's probably more things coming down the pipeline of, all right, guys, we got to change this, do that. So, y'all are not going over certain barriers. What's your thoughts? We mentioned quarter mile. There's a lot of fans out there that were definitely upset, moving to 1,000 feet. But like the first time I went to Pomona, I was like, oh, I understand now why we're going to 1,000 feet. I get it, because it's such a short shutdown. But is there any facility that could handle a quarter mile runs of fuel cars right now?
Gainesville could, Phoenix could, but you can't have two different tune-ups. The crew chiefs can't just have a crankshaft for 1,000 foot and a crankshaft for quarter mile. It's not that easy to just change it over to run the car a quarter mile. There's so many things we've done to shorten the fuse to make them run bigger speeds at 1,000 foot than they even used to run the quarter mile. Here's the other thing. Unless you want to get rid of 16 of the 21 tracks on tour, if we went back to quarter mile, and I'm fine with going back to a quarter mile, but what's ruined it is the scoreboards. If we went back to quarter mile and for a year the scoreboards were shut off, the fans would love the show. But once they've seen all these big speeds, these 337s, 338s, Robert Hike's 339, you can't see that at a quarter mile. We would not have enough shutdown area if anything went wrong with the race cars. Goodyear does not want us running 340 miles an hour. So they've already put more rev limiter on us to reduce the speeds at 1,000 foot. If we go back to the quarter mile, it's going to be about 305 miles an hour, which, by the way, is incredibly impressive. In fact, at this race coming up next week, or this weekend in Gainesville, in 1992, Kenny Bernstein went 301.70, and the crowd is still cheering. The problem is we've gone so much faster than that now. The fans have gotten jaded because of the scoreboards. Shut them off, slow us way down, go back to a quarter mile. It would be an amazing time at that point. But I got to tell you, when they initially went to 1,000 foot, all of us thought it was a stopgap measure for a short duration of time. But it really fixed a lot of things. The racing's closer than it's ever been. The crew chiefs have found a way to make the fuse short even on 1,000 foot. But the speeds are up. I mean, there's nothing about 1,000 foot that isn't better than the quarter mile used to be, except for we have two different finish lines, and that's hard to explain to people. And we are the quarter mile sport. We were never identified as 1,000 foot, and that's going to be a hard issue to fix.
It is. But, look, I got the safety aspects of it. And look, you still have nitromethane burning cars going down the track. It's still crazy impressive. You can still have opportunities for races to change and switch up in, mid-track. I mean, it's not that much more when you think about it going to the quarter mile. And it's like, guys, come on. I mean, why are we hanging up on this? And I agree with you. The scoreboard. We're in a time right now with like the door slammer events. Like, if you don't set a record, did you even have a race? Did you have an event? And it's like, guys, they're still racing. So what if there wasn't a record? You got good, close racing. What does it matter if it's not the fastest pass ever made between these? So, yeah, I think the scoreboard, I agree with you. That would be a hang-up. People would be like, oh, they're slower and things of that nature, even if they got the quarter mile back. So,
and if there was one fell swoop change that they could make to slow the cars down and let us go back to quarter mile, it would be more manageable. The problem is, what do? Do you take one mag out of the motor? Do you restrict the fuel pump size? Do you make a smaller engine? My point being is, whatever you did, let's say they took half our fuel volume away. Now you would want to build smaller cylinder heads. You'd want to change the camshaft. You'd want to go to a supercharger that works a little bit different. a lot of our parts would become obsolete. So NHRA is trying to figure out, how do you do this and you don't bankrupt the Terry Haddocks, you don't put the Tim Wilkersons and Terry McMillans out of business, and you don't put the Forces, the Colettas, and the Schumachers on the warpath because all these parts they just machine are now just expensive junk. That's going to be a very tough call to make.
Tough call, certainly. And, with any switch, with any changeover, that transition for the fans, just like it was for 1,000 feet, if it went back to the quarter mile, that transition, it would almost be like taking a step backwards at this point. It wouldn't be really like going back to a heritage, going back to what it was. It would be a step backwards. And no matter if y'all went back to a quarter mile, and let's say you went back, it's at 3:05. Well, eventually someone's going to pop off 3:10, and eventually someone's going to pop off 3:15.
Well,
it just keeps progressing.
Right. What you would have to do is build a rules package around whatever horsepower level on a great run. I would give you 305, which that means an average run is going to be 295, right? You might be lucky in a given race weekend to see 3 or 4 300-mile-an-hour runs. But again, the scoreboard's the issue. Once the fans get used to seeing something and you take that away from them, they're going to cry foul. Well, this isn't quite the same as say, football or baseball, where it doesn't necessarily matter what the scoreboard says as long as it's thrilling. Drag racing, man, our fans, they want thrilling and they want the scoreboard to say something impressive. Now, personally, I would much rather see a close side-by-side race than one car that sets a national record while the other car blows up. But if you go to a nostalgia race, and the nostalgia funny cars now are running 5.6 seconds at 258 miles an hour would be considered a pretty respectable pass, quarter mile. And you watch one of those cars from the grandstands, I'm going to tell you something, they're plenty fast enough. In other words, if you shut their scoreboards off and slowed them down to run 6 flat at 240 miles an hour, the show would be exactly as enjoyable to every fan. But we look at that scoreboard and it means something to us. And that's going to make it a tough hurdle to get around. Not only what do you do if we stay at 1,000 foot, but really what are you going to do if we go back to the quarter mile?
Right. And I think what you mentioned about the tune-ups, that's the key. You would have to have a whole nother package, another program for 2-3 events, possibly, maybe in the year, because I think most facilities probably really can't handle it. When we look at them today, I mean, I'm sure Texas Motorplex, it's, out there in Phoenix, but it makes sense for the move to 1,000 foot and keeping it there. If y'all have a moving target, well, moving targets also mean more money, like you mentioned.
Well, yeah. Listen, as a fan, remember, I'm a driver and I'm a fan. I told you this at the beginning. Why am I good with fans? Because I'm still a fan. So I also recognize what's exciting. As a fan, you know what I'd want to see? I'd want to see 3 or 4 quarter mile races a year. I would want to see a race where we shake up qualifying. And when you're done qualifying, they go to the number 1 qualifier and say, who are you calling out first round? And he says, I'm calling out the number 2 qualifier. Well, now that person got called out. Now they're going to go to the number 3 qualifier. I'd like to see a race where we draw names out of a hat for first round periods. I'd like to see dragsters race funny cars. Now, my crew chiefs are going to beat the crap out of me when I get to Gainesville for suggesting we should alternate finish lines here. And some of the purists are going to say, well, you're doing some crazy stuff here. But I think it would be really, really interesting. So let's get that off the table. You're not going to have 2 different finish lines. We're either going to be 1,000 foot or we're going to be quarter mile. And if we ever go back to a quarter mile, they're going to slow us down 30 miles an hour plus. And I get that. This is the number 1 question I get asked whenever I go do one of the fan experience question and answer sessions at the track. First hand that goes up, when are you guys going back to the quarter mile? I said, okay, just understand, you can have 330 miles an hour at 1,000 foot, or you can have 300 miles an hour at the quarter mile. Which one do you want? And when they mull it over, it's like, I guess I'd rather see the bigger speeds. Well, you can't necessarily tell the bigger speeds unless the scoreboard's telling you that. So that's what I get back to. Cut those off for a few races and we could run quarter mile and slow them way down, and the fans would absolutely still love the show. They'd shake the stands the same. They'd smell just as good, and the races would be close.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see at the pro level NHRA drag racing. Turn them scoreboards off. Let's go back to the 60s. Just heads up. There's one win light, and that's what you see. I mean, look, it's working for the Southeast Gassers Association. I mean, it's just heads up, no time drag racing, and they have close competition, and that's something people are definitely enjoying. So it's a formula that's working elsewhere.
Yeah, I just think that when you get to the top of the pyramid, the fans have expectations. And remember, a Southeast Gasser, if they run a new record, it's still not as fast as a pro stock car, which is still not as fast as a funny car, which is still not as quick as a top fuel car. So my point is when you get to the ultimate classes, the fans want to see those ultimate records.
Well, maybe there needs to be some no scoreboard events just tossed in there for the fun. And yeah, hey, people still talk about Bristol and the funny car versus dragsters. I would like to see that again. I thought that was pretty cool. And as John said, hey, I don't have to go in top fuel. I've won them. I beat them. So that was cool. That was cool. Jack, look, Chris, he asks this question. Hi, Jack. How does it feel to end the season at Las Vegas? Look, Pomona's been good to you recently, and now we're not going to end it in Pomona. Any thoughts on ending at Las Vegas, other than it being a gamble and going gambling?
Well, I might be ending my career at Vegas. I don't know if I'll get back in a fuel car again. It's September. We don't have a sponsorship for next year. And frankly, I've had a 6-year run because of Doug and Terry Chandler. I might have been having this conversation 6 years ago when the last sponsor moved on. So I am forever grateful to the Chandler family for not just for me, not just for all my teammates, but for Tommy Johnson Jr. and his teammates and the folks in the shop that have had a job because of that. I'm going to keep looking for sponsorship, and I hope I'm not done driving, but you never know. And this is the hard economics of drag racing. And by the way, COVID has not made this easier. So we've got a radically different season. They're going to do points and a half at Vegas, which I've never been a fan of points and a half at any race, whether I'm in first or in 10th, and I've been consistent on this, but that is what it is. And that's the way that we'll face the schedule. So I guess I'm going to be okay with it. I hope we've got 5 more chances to win for the Infinite Hero car. And we've changed a lot of injured veterans' lives in the last 6 years, and we're going to keep doing our best to do that by raising funds over the last 5 races. I sure as heck want to win a few more races in the championship, and then I'm going to get back to looking for sponsorship. If not for 2021, then for the next year. But for me, Vegas might be my last race. Now, the finals started in 1965, and I think they've been to 7 different drag strips. You know, they've been in Pomona since 1984, but God, right before that, they were Orange County and Ontario and all the way back to Texas. So why not add another list to the tracks that the finals have been contested at? And I don't think the silliness is going to end after that. I think the COVID deal is going to impact us into the first few races of 2021. So who knows if the Winter Nationals are Pomona or in Gainesville next year. I don't know. You know, I want to keep being a part of it. I'm going to do whatever I can to try to secure funding to get back out there. But again, I don't. Maybe Vegas 2020 is my final ride in a fuel car. So if that be it and that be the finals, then I want to be in the winner's circle.
I hear you. Well, let's take a look back at what was your last ride at the U.S. Nationals real quick and some footage I got on camera. Man, car looked good that day, as most of the Don Schumacher cars have been looking good so far in 2020 and into 2019. Now, look, you've answered all the questions of how the car ran, blah, 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 you know, cool, great. And I know you've even answered the question about the double bulbing, and you've answered that. This is what I want to ask on that, because so many times I'll put a video up on YouTube and people chiming in, oh, this person shouldn't have deep stage. Oh, you shouldn't burn down and blah, 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 blah. Well, Mr. Instructor, because you've been an instructor for a long time with Frank Hawley Drag Racing School, I've got to ask, are there unwritten rules in drag racing?
Sure. Recognize there's a difference between illegal and immoral, right? If you're going 1 mile an hour over the speed limit, that's illegal. It's not immoral. If you're a dick all day long, that might not be illegal, but that's kind of immoral. So we have legally 7 seconds from the time the first car is staged till the second car has to go in and light the stage beam. But man, you burn somebody down for 6.5 seconds in a fuel car, that's kind of a D-bag move because it impacts the balance of these cars, the heat and the clutch and all that. And that can decide the outcome of the race. And nobody wants to decide the outcome of a race based on somebody being a jerk up there. Now, what I did is I went in and lit the stage bulb before JR had even pre-staged, which would not be legal in a sportsman car. That would be courtesy staging. It's absolutely legal in a pro car. And it was absolutely a mistake on my part, which in theory gives JR a potential advantage of controlling the starting line at that point. To his credit, he didn't hang me out. He went in at a reasonable pace, but now I've got to hold the clutch in until I think he's getting ready to go in and stage and not build excess heat. And it worked out okay for us. Our Guido and Medley just had a fantastic tune-up in that car. In fact, if I'd have stayed shallow, we would have run a 389 on that run. The car was just on rails. Our only Achilles heel run was the second round against Caps, where the clutch wear was off and we ran slower than we intended to. But yes, I mean, there's things that I always fall back on. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. And on the double bulb, it didn't give me any advantage. I firmly believe if you're in a nitro car, the car that doesn't double bulb has an advantage that they could utilize. But there's other things that you just don't do. You don't hang anybody out up there, because I got to tell you, what comes around goes around when it comes to things like that.
So you've been an instructor for a long time, and I had Lou on earlier, and he's a instructor at a community college in the Mooresville area, and I was a high school welding instructor for a while, and we've all had those incidences where it's like, oh my goodness, what's going on here? Like I had 2 knuckleheads fill a piece of pipe with propane and light the striker and improvised bomb. And Lou shared his tale. Look, negative and positive instructor stories. What you got for me?
At Frank Hawley's, I've taught over 7,000 people. And the great thing is there's not a race I go to that there aren't people who have been through the class when I was the instructor. And there've been some amazing people: Erica Enders, Alexis DeJoria, all the Force girls, Robert Height, and the list goes on and on and on. A lot of sportsman racers. So you kind of got a built-in friend base there. And then I've definitely got stories. You got guys that come in there that I don't even know why they paid to come to the drag racing school, because they know everything about driving a car. And when they go out and make a run and they don't do well, they proceed to tell you what was wrong with the racetrack, your equipment, and how they're such a great driver. And I feel like they just wasted their time and money and the other students' time and my time by coming out there. And I could name names, by the way. There's a few you just don't get why their ego is bigger than maybe everything but their checkbook. But by and large, man, I loved my time with Frank Hawley's. I never quit. I went to work there in 1998. And at that time, the school had moved from Gainesville to Pomona. And then in 2001, we reopened Gainesville. We ran both locations. And what happened is every year our rent went up. And because of having the second school reopened, our number of people coming through Pomona was significantly less. And it just came to the point where financially it did not make sense to have both schools open. I never quit. I've still gone and done a lot of guest instructing for Frank. He and I have done some seminars together. I drive the 2-seat dragster for him. He's one of my favorite human beings in the world. I mean, one of the highlights of my career with the helmet on was getting to race Frank in the final round at Maple Grove. I think that was 2009. And with the helmet off, I got to induct him into the Drag Race Hall of Fame. And I wouldn't have had any of these opportunities to meet all these people, to interact like this, had I not taken a chance back in '98 and quit a great career as an elevator serviceman and taken an enormous pay cut to go teach at the drag racing school. And ironically, after all this, 22 years later, I'm looking at the very real possibility of going back into the elevator trade now.
Right. The normal job. But hey, at least you got something to fall back on. That's definitely a good thing. You're not just a wheel holder. You know more. You know more. So look, Dennis Page asks a interesting question. I don't think this is just COVID related, but even beyond. He says, Jack, what's your opinion on NHRA not letting everybody into the pits? Like there would be a program of people paying an extra price on a ticket while also dropping regular general admission for a pit pass. Do you think the NHRA has hung their hat on that pit pass thing so much they really couldn't do that? That would be my take. They just really couldn't do that.
Interesting you say that. I literally had a conversation in Glendora less than 2 weeks ago. And I said, I don't understand with the price that NHRA charges for a day at the drag races, why they're not lined up 4 miles down the road. In my opinion, it is the best bang for the buck. And if you don't believe me, go to Disneyland for a day, buy a ski lift ticket for a day. And I am such a hardcore drag race fan, I realize that maybe I'm a little bit skewed on that. So I think we need to do an experiment. And you're going to need to do it for several races in a row to weed out things like weather forecasts, other events in the area. So here's my take. Take Pomona, do it for 2 years, so it'll be 4 races there. Take the right side grandstands that are kind of sequestered away from the pit side by the geography of the track. Make those $25 seats with a $20 pit pass. And I know every ticket's a pit pass, but I have got pit passes from the late 80s that didn't come with the price of a ticket. That was never the case at every NHRA racetrack. Hell, I'll show you an article, an editorial in Hot Rod Magazine when Wally Parks was the editor, that he is mad that some of these racetrack owners are trying to make bucks by selling pit passes to the general public where they shouldn't be. Well, he changed his opinion on that later. But I would try this experiment, and let's see if it's really the purchase price that's keeping us from filling up the grandstands. And if that doesn't move the needle, maybe we need to try something else. I love that our fans can come see the pits, but I don't like having races with empty seats because you'll never get that revenue back. And I think our product is so amazing. An issue that we have with NASCAR, I think their television package makes the race more, I think it's a better experience sitting on your couch because you're not lost in the shuffle of which car's where and you can't see them on the back straight and you're trying to follow the radio. I think their announcers do such a wonderful job. Their cutaways, their specials, that their experience on TV is fantastic because it's all the cars on one track at the same time for one race. Drag racing on our TV, you got 4 pro classes, 4 rounds each, maintenance in the pits in between, and it doesn't shake your living room. You don't get that smell that fills up your lungs and makes your eyes water, and it doesn't pound your chest when the cars are going. My point is, drag racing, as good as our TV package is something that everybody has to experience in real life. And I think the ones that do that come back again and again and again. So we're going to need to be better at catering to those first-time spectators and enticing people to come out and be first-time spectators, because I think once you hook them for life.
I think that's uh-oh, did I go out? Oh, I'm back. Cool. Awesome. Wow. So, yeah, I've taken friends to the drag strip, and, you know, first time they've ever seen it, maybe they're used to circle track racing or dirt track racing, and they're like, wow, I got to come back, and they come back. It is something people have got to see. It's that surreal. It's that true sensory overload. Or if you can get them to stand next to a fueler and it throttle whacks, you know, you've got them. So yeah.
No, I agree. When we get the fans, specifically in areas that have been dominated by NASCAR, Richmond, Charlotte, places like that, Bristol, they'll come over to the pits and say, oh my God. And these are people that might be 40, 50, 60 years old. And for whatever reason, they just never came to a drag race. And they said, I'm a NASCAR fan and I'm totally converted now. And I said, wait a minute, I'm not telling you that I want you to stop watching NASCAR races. I love all motorsports. I'm just telling you, congratulations for experiencing a new type of food. And I'm so glad you like it. I want you to come back and have it more often.
Definitely, definitely. It's always amazed me that folks get honed in on one motorsport, and that's all that they, look at. That's all that they follow. And I'm like, man, the motorsport world is so rich. Now, with that being said, Jack, most people in other forms of motorsports will look at what you do, what you sit behind, and what you do on a track and go, he is absolutely insane. I'm never going to do that. So, from the funny car seat, what do you think in the motorsports world is absolutely insane?
Top Fuel Harley. I don't know what the minimum is, 4 testicles to get on one of those things, but I think that's a special breed of human being. And the interesting thing is, I kind of started to get to know that crowd in the Top Fuel Harley arena, and they're big teddy bears for the most part. They're the guys that you picture as the extras, as the bouncers in a movie, and most of them are just surprisingly approachable. The hydroplane boats, the chances when things go wrong in those vehicles, they go terribly wrong. You can argue that these supercross racers, these motorcycle racers, my God, the things that they are capable of physically and how quickly things can go wrong. What strikes me as a funny car driver is not when I'm in the car. It's if I lose early or I'm at a test session and I go sit in the stands and you watch how truly scary quick these cars accelerate. It really brings the perspective home, because in the car, I'm highly focused. I'm picking out a spot down track, and I've got a program that I need to go through to get that car to the finish line. And until the point comes that the parachutes are out and I'm safely slowing down, I don't ever let my guard down. That's really the first time you can kind of take a breath and decompress. I don't get to enjoy the run. If there was a passenger seat in these cars so we could strap you in, you'd get to enjoy the run. It would be the roller coaster deal. You get all the excitement with none of the responsibility. Well, it's the inverse for me. I have all the responsibility, so I don't get much of the excitement.
Yeah, getting close to the drag racing like I have the past year and a half, and I'm at the line filming Strutmaster cars and some other cars, and it's very hard to explain what it's like being behind a Top Fuel dragster funny car and at launch. The way I explain it is like your life has been put on pause for a moment. Just like I clench my teeth while I'm holding the camcorder, and I know it's coming, and just you can't focus on it. It's so challenging, and I say that to say I'm standing off behind it, and I'm like, there's a human under that body. There's folks, I've seen the comments on like 1320 videos YouTube channel of when Worsham was over in the Middle East and he made a few blasts. They're like, there's no way a human's in that. I'm like, no, folks, there's a human in there. As surreal and crazy as it is, there is a human in there. For me, go ahead.
Yeah, it's tough with the English language that there's not enough superlatives or adjectives to really accurately describe the sensation of being around one of these cars without throwing in several expletives. But you're right, and this goes back to what I said. We've got to get people to see it in person. If you stand on the starting line between two of these cars, I think an accurate way to describe it is it feels like it literally sucks the air away from the starting line when the two cars leave. You can't not have your earplugs. So you've already dulled one of your senses there. You're overwhelmed by the smell. It's pounding your chest. You kind of want to curl up in a fetal position, but you don't want to miss the action. And then when they take off, I can't imagine anything would come close to that except for being in combat with these big shells going off around you.
Yeah, that's the only thing. I mean, and I've never experienced that. And it's like your life, that moment, just, there's no thought there. You don't even recognize your heart beating. You don't even recognize breathing. It just that one moment. And then, I can focus because the car is already down the track. I mean, it's just wild. It's just wild. So, for me, the guys who do the Isle of Man TT, those guys are just absolutely insane.
Yeah, I don't know if the sidecar guys are smarter or dumber than the regular motorcycle guys, but yeah,
Right.
to watch them go 130 miles an hour around these little narrow lanes and not know what's on the other side of the turn, that ranks right up there on the dumb meter, I think,
It
or
is.
the really cool meter. They're the
Yeah.
same meter to me.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. I mean, this is the first year that they will have no fatalities because they didn't race. I mean, that's how
Right, that's
insane.
kind of a
Yeah.
given. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just insane. It's just insane. Well, look, Jack, I have enjoyed having you on. I knew it would be good because you give such good information. You've got such great insight. I want to ask one more question from a fan, and then we're going to let you go. Thank you for being on. So, Sam, he asks this. Well, he says he hopes to see you racing next year. I do too. But he asks, what is your favorite helmet that you've had over your career?
Oh, well, they're right behind me right now, and I've had many, but I'll say off the top of my head, uh, because I'm a historian, it's going to be. Can I grab it for a second?
Yeah, man, do it. Do it. Go grab it.
Yeah, I've got one that's got all the funny car champs listed over the years, but this is probably my all-time favorite, and it's all nicknames. So it's got the snake, the mongoose. It's got uh, on the back where it says who. That's kind of one of the cooler nicknames of all time. It was Marvin Graham who won the 74 U.S. Nationals and came out of nowhere. And then I've got like 65 other names on here. There's TV Tommy Ivo, and right below him, the Peregrine. That's my buddy Wayne King. Watchdog is Tommy Allen. And I just love the fact that it's a tribute to all the cool people. Well, it's not all the nicknames. I put a list of about 100, and all he could get on here was 60 something, but pretty cool. That's probably my all-time favorite.
That's a good favorite to have. I like that helmet, Jack. Like that. Well, Jack, look, thank you again for your time. I hope you have a good Gator Nationals, and I'm sure a Don Schumacher funny car is probably going to be in victory lane one way or the other, and hopefully it's you pulling for you, man.
Yeah, so we've won 9 in a row dating back to last year. So it's interesting if the Schumacher funny car can get in there. That'll be the 10th DSR Mopar in a row in a winter circle. I think we did that before in like 17 or 16. So it's pretty cool. But let me tell you, at this point, remember, there's no countdown. It's ultimate points like it used to be prior to 2007. I just want to win the next 5 races and put an exclamation point on this.
Yes, sir. Put an exclamation mark on it because you don't know what 2021 might hold. Well, Jack, we're pulling for you. Thank you for your time, man. Folks, thank you. Part 2 of Between the Slicks with Jack Beckman. I'm the Monday Morning Racer. Take care. We'll see you at the Gators.